on the first day of August 2018. The title of this episode, Fakes and More Fakes, from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. It's a very interesting topic. Facebook has made news in the last day or two. We have several installments here from Facebook, the source, and we will append one, the removing bad actors on Facebook, period. And we have also from the product manager here an in-depth update on fake news from the product manager, tracking it. Now, this in itself is interesting. This is on the news feed itself. This was at the annual Development Council, Facebook's developing, conference. Sorry about that one. And this is Greg Mara, Director of Product Management, but describing how we are organizing ourselves to more effectively anticipate and prevent abuse using Facebook. Problems surface and actions here, and this is a little clip here where the person is this is Trisha Lyons, the product manager. Now, the other person here, let me make sure I get these people right here, is a platform manager, how Facebook is set up. Facebook in itself is a commercial enterprise. That's the first thing to remember. And the news feed is a source of commerce. And it's not an objective, it's a subjective listing in itself. And this is a part of the problem that you have anytime that you try to connect or coexist a commercial enterprise who has its own self-interest and other enterprises that attempt to serve the people or disserve the people. Now, to further clog this up, you have fact checkers. The problem with fact checkers is not the facts. The problem is this massive campaign by the Trump administration, DJ Trump in particular, via Twitter. They have decided, and this is something that's been going on for a very long time, the idea of fake news, particularly on the right. The right has always flourished under the idea of non-factual events. Because conspiracy theories come around, that doesn't mean conspiracies do not exist. Yes, they do. The Kennedy assassination is one. But later we'll look at a lawsuit against none other than old Alex Jones, a purveyor of hate, fake news, and that has been his business on Sandy Hook. He's being sued. He's trying to get this lawsuit dismissed. It will not happen. And this is a part of what is happening here. But when you take on a sheer propaganda by saying, well, CNN is all fake news, utterly impossible. There could be some news that's non-factual on CNN. It's sort of like factual news on the Fox network. Now, you separate out what is amplified, in other words, just sheer propaganda. You hear a lot of that and a lot of commentators on Fox. But when you hear DJ Trump talk about photo IDs for buying food and various other things, about the border, his inauguration, how many hundreds of thousands of people were there, when it was proven it just simply did not exist. And when you have the commander-in-chief as the chief faker, this makes things a bit more dicey. And you have the profit motive behind Facebook. Nonetheless, its value has dropped 19, almost 20%. People just aren't buying it. That's why Facebook is out here trying to prevent some. But in its essence, trying to prevent a few bad actors, there are thousands of bad actors. Even when you have a legitimate group here, the nuts are going to be on it. and they will, of course, post links there that are non-factual. There are also people out there that are just sheer gullible, that come up with all kinds of kooky ideas, and they show up in these groupings that are groups themselves. Now we'll look at some of those. Now one is an event later in August here in Washington D.C. The legitimate event, and some people piggybacking on it. But that's happened numerous times. For instance, you will have a political organization like the CPUSA, and then you'll have another party that's calling themselves a CP. Different parties, different ideological standpoints. Or you'll have a name of an organization, a name of a company that is very similar. The idea there is to somewhat cause confusion. Now, it would not necessarily be fake news if it were not on something like Facebook. But this whole idea is to, as Jesse Jackson would say, hoodwink people into thinking that the unreal is the real. And this is part of the problem that you face. And when you continually have these pronouncements that turn out to be non-factual from DJ Trump, that creates some problems, because that's just not on the Facebook news feed. That is in the pages of newspapers. The idea of A.G. Sulzenberger, the editor of the New York Times, meeting with DJ Trump on fake news, that in itself is an affront to humanity. Period. But you have that problem with the commercial news outlets. They, for their financial survival, they need to piggyback on DJ Trump. And of course, DJ Trump needs them to get out his message. He'll put a message out on Twitter, or his minions will, and the press will pick it up. But when they pick it up, if it is in fact fake, it becomes real. People remember the tweet. They don't remember the fact checker that takes time to check the fact. And that is part of the problem that you have out here. The fact checkers have been lessened themselves in terms of their quote-unquote legitimacy. Not that they're incorrect. It's that when you have these flippables, and it gets to be a very dicey situation, understanding what is sheer propaganda. That's been around forever in political campaigns and political events, such as Reagan used to go around talking about welfare queens. That welfare queen did not exist. But in the 80s, you did not have fact checkers. And of course, Reagan did not have Twitter. What happens in social media, things get amplified immediately. And some of the events that you see out there are not necessarily fake news, but they're events that are misreported. And I can recall here WBRN radio and all Boston Red Network, but we've taken articles from the New York Times and other quote-unquote monopoly outlets that have got it wrong because they rushed out there. Now there's other instances like Mr. Dan Rather that was hoodwinked in the 2000 campaign by an individual that presented him with some facts and later reneged and said, well, no, we didn't exactly say that. They were talking about G.W. Bush's military record, which mysteriously disappeared. So in other words, you didn't have anything to base your facts on. That's a different situation than when it's deliberately put out here via these groups. You'll hear from this product manager later, but let's get to the Facebook part, and we'll append this removal of bad actors, and you can read it for yourself. A lot of articles have been based on this. It says removed. Today we removed 32 pages and accounts from Facebook and Insignia because they were involved in a coordinated inauthentic behavior. This kind of behavior is not allowed on Facebook because we don't want people or organizations creating networks of accounts to mislead others about what they are and what they are saying. That says quite a bit right there. We are still in the very early stages of our investigation and don't have all the facts. This itself is something that's not very encouraging, including who is behind it. The problem is they will more than likely never find out who is behind it. And this goes back to the core of many bad actors around the world, intelligence services, etc., the U.S. efforts to interfere in the internal affairs of Iran. When you interfere in one nation, as happened in the Ukraine and various other places, and officially happened from actors representing Hillary Monster Clinton in Foggy Bottom, in relation to the Russian elections. Now, when you start having this type of behavior out there, it's going to migrate to Facebook. It's not clear whoever set up these accounts went to much great length to obstruct their true that the Russians, this is a Russian research agency did. That is in the past. We believe this could be partially due to changes we made over the past year to make it this kind of abuse much harder. But security is not something that is ever done. We face determined, well-financed adversaries who will never give up and are consistently changing their tactics. Well, that's the same thing with the spammers, phishers, and others. It's an arm race. Now, this is a very interesting term here. We need to constantly improve, too. Now, they use the word arms race. We've seen the militarization not only of the attempt to militarize space, but to militarize cyberspace. The NSA has been at this for a very, very long time. We are constantly changing tactics. It's an arms race, and we need to conversely improve, too. It's why we are investing heavily in more people. Well, yeah, and when you have as many people as they have, better technology to prevent bad actors from misusing Facebook, as well as work more closely with law enforcement. Now, this is a two-edged sword here. About 2 weeks ago, we identified the first of 8 pages and 17 profiles on Facebook, as well as 7 on Insignia accounts that violate our ban on coordinated inauthentic behavior. Now, that's a new term that's come out in the lexicon. We removed all of them, and this morning, once we completed our initial investigation and shared that information with law enforcement. They've also partnered with the Atlantic Council's Digital Rights Forensic Unit. In total, more than 250,000 accounts followed at least one of these pages. The earliest of which was created in March of 2017. The most followed page was the Azarian Warriors, Black Elevation. I would tell you that was a very strange one to begin with. Mindful Being and Resistors. The remaining pages have been between 0 to followers, and Insignia accounts had 2 followers. Well, it's a hit and miss. There were more than 9,500 original posts created by these accounts on Facebook, and one on Insignia. They ran about 150 ads for approximately $11,000 on Facebook and Insignia, and paid in U.S. and Canadian dollars. Well, that's pretty easy to do. Any money exchange, you can go downtown Tehran or any other nation of the backward hills of Afghanistan and find money types there. with 50s and 100s, as they used to say, C notes, and you can get exchange right there on the dusty road. We are still reviewing all of the content and ads from these pages. And here are some examples, and they have a picture here of Huey P. Newton, Black Elevation. Black Elevation itself would tell you that something is, as young people say, up. It's not good. These bad actors have been more careful to cover their tracks and pass due to actions that we've taken from previous abuse. We found these activities as part of an ongoing effort to coordinate inauthentic behavior. And they have one here, women do not have to, and it looks very suspicious to begin with. Resistance page also created a Facebook event for a protest. Now this is on the 10th to the 12th of August, enlisting support from real people. The event, No Unite to Right, that's in D.C. We saw that event scheduled in the Washington Post to prevent an August Unite to Right event in D.C. Inauthentic administrator of admin, of the resistance pages connected with admins from 5 legitimate pages. Well, it's pretty easy to do. The legitimate pages unwillingly helped build interest to No Unite to Right to DC and posted information about transportation materials, etc. In the end of fascism, they have a banner up here, No Unite to Right, DC 2. And they have some interest up there. We disabled the event earlier today and have reached out to the admins of the 5 other pages to update them on what happened. An event you are attaining, this is what they say here, are interested in has been removed. Learn more. We don't have all the facts, and sometimes that's not a good idea to put it out before you have at least most of the facts. We are seeing real benefits from working and with outside experts. This is the Atlantic Council here, identified Facebook groups with roughly 4,000 members. It was created by the Russian government actors, but has been dominated since we disabled the group. Admin last year. Groups typically persist on Facebook persist on Facebook events when their admins are disabled, but we choose to remove the groups to protect the privacy of its members. How much can companies know about who is behind the cyber threats? This is from the Chief Security Officer here, deciding when and how to publicly link suspicious activity to a specific organization, government, and individuals, a challenge that governments and many companies faced last year. The process of striving observed behavior to a peculiar threat actor has been much debated in the academic and intelligence community, determining who is behind the action. Let me put on my glasses here. The first challenge is figuring out the type of entity to which we are attributing the responsibility. This is hard than it sounds. It is standard for both traditional security attacks and information operations to be conducted using commercial infrastructure or computers belonging to innocent people. And that is part of the problem that you always have. Suspicious linked activity to individuals or groups with the primary operational responsibility for the malicious action. We can then potentially associate multiple campaigns to one set of actors, studying how they abuse our system. That's sort of like using Canadian U.S. currency. The relationship between malicious actors and real-world sponsors can be difficult to determine in the press, especially for activities sponsored by nation states. In a seminal paper on the topic, Jason Healy describes a spectrum to measure the degree of state responsibility for cyber attacks. They include discrete steps ranging from state prohibited, where the state activity stops attacks originating from their territory there. And that can also happen because you can fake a domain. The framework is helpful when looking at two major organized attempts to interfere in the 2016 election. And we are now working on 2018. One set of actors used hacking techniques to steal information from email accounts, commonly called phishing. The recent special counsel indictments is the Russian military intelligence service, but what will come of that? Not very little. 4 methods of attribution. Academics have written about various methods of attributing activity to cyber actors, but our purpose, we simplify these methods into attribution models of 4 general categories. Political motivation. In this model, inferred political motivations are measured against known political goals of nation states, providing a public attribution based on a political evidence, especially challenging for companies because we don't have the information needed to make this kind of evaluation. Coordination. They've talked about sometimes we will observe signs of coordination between threat actors, even when the evidence indicates that they are operating as separate technical inner structures. Tools, techniques, and procedures. By looking at how a threat group performs their actions to achieve a goal, including reconnaissance, planning, exploitation, command and control, distribution of information is often possible to infer a linkage between these people. Technical forensics, by studying the specific indicators of compromise left behind. We've long done this, but this is only for amateur day. Applying the framework to our new discovery. As mentioned, we will not provide an assessment of a political motivation of a group behind this activity. We have found evidence connecting between these accounts and previously identified IRA accounts. For example, one instance, an IRA account was administered on Facebook, controlled by this group. These are important details, but on their own insufficient to make a determination. Some of the techniques and procedures of this actor are consistent with what we saw. This is a Russian intelligence service, I believe. Our technical forensics are insufficient to provide high confidence attributed at this time. But they're working with law enforcement agencies and various others. Given all this, we are not going to attribute this activity to any group right now. Now, this is in the 2016 elections. Now, part of the problem here, in this old picture of Huey P. Newton, it tells you right away that it is no doubt a fake. It looks fake in itself, and sometimes you can actually tell what is going on here. The Atlantic Council Partnership, we talked about that. Today, we're excited to launch a new partnership with the Atlantic Council, which has a stellar reputation of looking at innovative solutions to hard problems. Digital forensic experts from its digital forensic laboratories. Anyway, this is one of the things here. And let me see if I can... Oops. We'll have to go to a different page here to find this. The center of much of this fakery, and this is commercial fakery, and this is one thing to understand. Conspiracy theories, and this is from the Reuters. Jones seeks dismissal. This is pretty standard in defamation suit. Not going to happen. This is Austin, Texas. Lawyers for conspiracy theorists, and they've already labeled him that, were due to ask the Texas court on Wednesday to dismiss a lawsuit against him and his InfoWars website, filed by the parents of 2 children killed in 2012 at Sandy Hook in Connecticut. Jones, who lives in Travis County, he lived in Travis County, Texas, has used his media platform to call the mass shootings at an elementary school that killed 26 people a hoax, and suggested a political cover-up took place by left-wing forces seeking to take advantage of the shooting to support their cause as gun control. He actually represents the NRA. In 2013, we called him massacre staged, and continued to stroke his conspiracy theories for years. Sandy Hook is completely false. Completely false, with actors, in my view, manufactured, he said in January of 2015 broadcast. Although his theory is false, people who believe Jones have for years harassed and taunted families of the victims. Court papers show, and the families have said, some of the families say they have been subject to death threats, been forced to move several times in an effort to escape harassment. The lawsuit was filed in April by Leonard Posner and Company, Della Ross, and etc., seeks at least $1 million in damages. Each claim Jones repeatedly asserted the Sandy Hook shooting were staged, and this has been something he's been saying for a long time. The parents said Jones engaged in a campaign of false, cruel, and dangerous assertions. A gunman killed 20 students and 6 adults at Sandy Hook, that's in Newtown, Connecticut, on December the 14th, 2012. An attack that ranks amongst the most deadly in U.S. history. Since the founding of this InfoWars in 1999, Jones has built a vast audience. He also promotes theories that 9/11 attacks were staged by the government. Well, a lot of people have promoted those, but the problem is a lack of evidence. The lawsuits in Texas were the first defamation cases brought by parents against Jones. He's also facing civil actions in Connecticut in a lawsuit by additional parents. There's going to be more and more lawsuits there. I suppose Jones put this as a course of doing business. But the problem with Jones, if he loses his defamation lawsuit and loses on appeal, obviously it'll be an appeal to the Texas Supreme Court, his case on Facebook becomes very murky, because Facebook is providing a commercial platform for Jones, who sells a product. See, Jones is not a non-profit entity. He's there for profit. He has advertisers. He sells products. And this is what keeps Facebook going. You noticed 11,000 ads were purchased by these shady groups that Facebook itself identified. And this is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, that this is all done in a commercial environment. Google ends up selling ads, this whole vicious circle of selling ads. And you have to remember that when you have millions of people accessing a platform, it's not unusual for several thousand to access a totally fake event, and how it is put out there. The Huey Newton picture itself is a dead ringer. You understand that. But there are folks out there that are not very sophisticated, that even in legitimate groups end up on the wrong track, so to speak. that put evidence up there that they have not checked upon at all. So you have things like Snoops, etc., various types of fact checkers by the husband and wife team, and other fact checkers out there. But the problem is with DJ Trump supporters, there are millions of those, don't believe the fact checkers. So it makes the job much, much harder. And when he's allowed to go on Twitter with information that's known to be totally false, not factual, then there is a problem with the rules at Twitter. Any ordinary person would have been warned, free striked out, and would not have been on Twitter anymore. So there are problems in 2008 with all of these theories that are out there and with the types of activities we have. Let me go to the baseball scores. We're going to do the winners and losers. We won't do it now. The Giants and Padres down in San Diego. It was Giants 3-2. Giants had 10 hits and no errors. The Padres 5 hits and no errors. The Phillies and Red Sox in Fenway Park. It was Phillies 3-1. The Orioles and Yankees in New York. Yankees 6-2. The Mets and Nationals, it was just a slugfest there. 25-4. The Mets had 4 runs. And maybe 9 hits. And nonetheless, the Nationals had 26 hits and 1 error there. The Cubs and Pirates in Pittsburgh. It was Pirates 5-4 over the Cubbies. Mr. Lester was a loser in that contest. The Reds and Tigers in the Motor City. A 2-1 score. You don't see very many of those anymore. The Angels and Rays in Florida. 10-6 Rays over the Angels. I guess the Angels need to stay in California. The Marlins and Atlanta. Atlanta 14-6 it appears here. And the Royals and White Sox on the south side of Chicago. Royals 4-2. The Royals are sort of up and down. Cleveland and the Twins in Minnesota. Cleveland 6-2. Well, the Twins got rid of Dozier, sent him to the Dodgers. The Rockies and Cardinals in St. Louis. It was the Rockies, a game we tuned in, 6-3. Mr. Gray was the winner there. Mr. Flannery was a loser. Mr. Davis, who used to be with Kansas City with the Cubs, was a winner. He's having a winning year for the Rockies. The Rangers and D-backs in Arizona, 6-5 the score there. Toronto and the Athletics in Oakland, another game we tuned into, 6-2 was the score there. Athletics had 11 hits, 2 errors. And Toronto, 5 hits and 1 error. The Astros and Mariners out in Seattle. Astros 5-2. The Astros are almost unstoppable. The Brewers and Dodgers in Los Angeles. Dodgers got shut out there, 1-0. Mr. Jeffers was a winner. Bueller, it seems, Bueller, was a loser there. Molly was a winner for the Brewers. Well, the Brewers didn't drink too much beer. I guess the flight to L.A. sort of cut them out of the ball game. Winners and losers in this end of July trade. The Nationals for not trading Bruce Harper. That's an interesting situation. The Philadelphia Phillies acquired Chris Harper and Comey Kohler. Atlanta got Kevin Gausman. Wait a minute here. Yeah, Kevin Gausman. Los Angeles reported Brian Dozier. Now they're there with Manny Machado. The Dodgers are going to make a race in the West of the National League. The Brewers, for dropping the Travis Shaw trade. I guess the Brewers didn't drink too much beer. The losers here, the Nationals, no doubt. The Dodgers for not adding a setup reliever. the Red Sox for not adding bullpen help there. They need some help. There's no doubt about that. That was Taylor Thornburg is back. And Joe Kelly will bounce back from his recent struggles. And the Colorado Rockies just did nothing. The Astros, pretty much they have what they need. They got a suspended reliever, Roberto Osmond. Anyway. So, this is it. The Mariners have made 3 trades. They acquired Adam Warren and Zach Duke on a Monday. So, everybody's trying to get somebody. I suppose that is a part of it. That will do it for us. Fake and more fake. And we'll see you, let's see, this is Wednesday. Perhaps on a Thursday. Incidentally, the election, let me just go to it. In Zimbabwe, we have President Mugabe's speech. We'll have to bring that forward to you on BR on the World. Let me just get this. The ZANU-PF party has won the most seats in the parliament that we have, and the presidential outcome, incomplete results there from the Electoral Commission. We'll have that on BR on the World. We don't have who won the presidency in numbers. 5,635,706 voted. 43.5% are under the age of 35. And there were 10,000 plus polling stations. And they had all kinds of observers going through there. I'll keep some observers for the 2016 election here. So we'll see how all of this turns out. Nelson Chamiska, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, was a youthful candidate at age of 40 there. So that's all we have on that particular situation. We have the product manager, and will come after us. Good day.
On newsfeed and giving people more information when they do encounter it. Now, we know that false news manifests alongside other problems and shows up on other surfaces. It could be posted by fake accounts. You might see it on a page. So we work closely with other teams across Facebook using the company-wide framework. How? Let's start with remove. People often ask, why don't you simply remove false news? Facebook has a set of global community standards that outline what is and isn't allowed on our platform. They prohibit things like hate speech and violence. Actors and content that violate those community standards are removed. But we don't have a policy that requires that everything that you share must be true. Most people use Facebook to connect with friends and family. Imagine if we checked the veracity of everything you share. Did you really get engaged? What was really said in the room where it happens? While we don't have a policy that prohibits you from posting information that isn't true, we do take very seriously our responsibility to fight the spread of false news and misinformation. And there are some times where we use the remove action. For example, we remove 1 million fake accounts per day. Fake accounts are often used to seed or spread false news and misinformation, so this is an important part of our overall strategy. We also remove advertising and monetizing eligibility for the pages and domains that repeatedly share false news. As Greg said, we don't want to make money from or pay money to these bad actors. And for those repeat offenders, we'll investigate them to see if there are any other community standards violations, like hate speech, violence, bullying. And if we identify those violations, we'll remove the entire page or domain. Next, reduce. The most important action we take to fight the spread of problematic content across Facebook is to reduce the likelihood that you see it in your newsfeed. We believe that downranking misleading content strikes the right balance between encouraging free expression and promoting a safe and authentic community. In order to reduce the spread of false news, we use newsfeed ranking. Newsfeed ranking is what determines the order in which you see things in your newsfeed. And it does so by considering hundreds of thousands of signals, as Adam talked about, like who posted something and what type of content it was, and by making a few dozen predictions. How likely are you to find this particular story meaningful? How likely is this article overall to be informative? One way that we reduce false news in newsfeed is by understanding and disrupting the incentives for financially motivated spammers. We use newsfeed ranking to do this. A lot of false news on Facebook is financially motivated, and Mark talked about this morning when he talked about spam. It's like, Viagra emails in the 90s. The way that it works is that financially motivated bad actors post hoaxes on Facebook in order to try to get people to click through to land on their websites where they monetize with ads. Their financial incentives depend on people seeing and clicking on their content. And we want to disrupt those incentives. To do so, we work to understand the tactics. For example, oftentimes they'll use clickbait in the headlines in order to try to increase the click-through rate. And their websites will often be covered in low-quality, malicious ads, something that we sometimes call ad farms. We build classifiers to identify clickbait, ad farms, and other tactics of financially motivated spammers. And based on those predictions, we reduce the order in which these kinds of stories appear in newsfeed. This reduces the likelihood that you see them, the likelihood that you click on them, and therefore the amount of money that spammers are able to make from them. And that, in turn, disrupts their incentives for creating this kind of content in the first place. Now, another way that we use newsfeed ranking in order to reduce the prevalence and the spread of misinformation and false news is by working with independent third-party fact-checkers. Third-party fact-checking is just one part of our strategy, but it gets a lot of attention, and so we wanted to spend a minute on it. Here's how it works. We use machine learning to predict potentially false stories. And when we've predicted them, we send them to fact-checkers. Fact-checkers review those stories and rate their accuracy. Once we get a false report from a fact-checker, we take action. We reduce the distribution of that story in newsfeed by using that false report as a signal in the newsfeed ranking algorithm. And we take what we learn from fact-checkers to improve our machine learning classifiers so that we're able to identify more potentially false news stories and to do so even faster. Next, inform. People are inundated with information, and it's hard to know what to trust. So we're working to try to give people more context about the things that they're seeing in their newsfeed. Here are just a few examples. If an article that's been reviewed by a fact-checker appears in newsfeed, we'll show more context from the fact-checker in the related articles unit. If someone tries to post or share that content, we'll pop up a little warning screen just to make them aware of the additional reporting that exists. And if they shared it in the past, before we had a fact-checker rating, we'll send them a notification once we get the rating. For all stories in newsfeed, whether or not they've been reviewed by fact-checkers, we're working to give people more context through this inform icon. Across all of these products, our goal is to give people more information about the stories they're seeing in their newsfeed. So how's it going? Well, a hoax article would generally have its views increase over time and then start to decline. We've seen that by working with fact-checkers, we're able to stop that virality and reduce future views by over 80% once we get a false rating. But it takes time for fact-checkers to review stories, and with good reason. It takes a lot more time and resources to report on facts than to create hoaxes. So we know that we need to do more to accelerate our ability to predict potentially false stories. And we also know that we're always going to be behind if we're just going after individual pieces of content, which is why we also take action against the pages and domains that repeatedly share this type of content. We'll reduce their distribution, ban them from advertising, and ban them from monetizing. Across these actions, we're stopping them from reaching, growing, or monetizing their audiences. So where do we go from here? We're ramping up our work on fact-checking in the lead up to elections. In the US, we're partnering with the Associated Press to use their fact-checkers in all 50 states in order to identify and debunk potentially false stories related to local, state, and federal elections. Internationally, we've now launched fact-checking partnerships in almost a dozen countries, including recent launches in Mexico, Indonesia, and most recently Ireland. And we're planning on scaling to more. We're also testing fact-checking for photos and videos. We know that these are increasingly important mediums for spreading false news and misinformation, and they also present new challenges for us to figure out both technically and through partnerships. And we're working to increase our transparency. For example, we now notify pages and domains if anything they share has been rated false by a fact checker. Across all of this, we know that we can't go it alone, which is why we're doubling down on partnerships with academics, governments, and other types of organizations. As Greg said, Newsfeed is one of 4 key areas where we're working to earn your trust, alongside safety, privacy, and elections. Greg shared our company-wide framework for fixing integrity issues across problems, surfaces, and actions, and I showed how he applied that framework to the problem of false news and misinformation. We know that we have a lot more work to do, and we're committed to doing it well. So we're going to stay focused on our responsibility and on our mission. And with that, we'll bring Adam back up and take your questions.